Hello, I think I'm actually live. I'm gonna wait just a couple of minutes. I'm behind schedule, um, which isn't surprising for anybody, I don't think. I'm gonna work on getting the phone at a little bit better angle for me here. Everything is a little thrown out of whack because of how cold it's been. And so everything was all set up for us to do in the office. Hi! Everything was all set up for us to do everything in the office. And it was going to be lovely. We would never have to set up or break down anything because it could always just be sitting in our office. Well, our office is not heated and it is not connected to our house. So it's really cold out there. And the technology does not like to be that cold, and the humans involved don't like to be that cold either. So, we've been moving everything around. So today was just set up to be a chat, a Nomad chat. And sorry, my light keeps flipping because, I've got the weird background behind me. And so I wanted to chat today. I wanted to show off my Roving Indiana yarn crawl yarn piece, which also happens to be my newest design, which I really, really like. But it has not been blocked yet, and it is one of those pieces that definitely needs to be blocked. So I thought I would chat and block it at the same time, so you guys could see kind of how I like to block things. So this is, I'll let it hold up against the light here. This is the piece. It's a drop stitch pattern. I love drop stitch patterns, and I've done a bunch of them in the past, to the point where I kind of set myself the rule that I wasn't allowed to do any more drop stitch designs for a while, just because I'd done so many of them. But it's been a couple of years, so I feel like it's allowed again. But let me bring it a little bit closer to the to there so you can actually see it a little bit closer. The yarn is the specialty dyed yarn by Leading Man Fiber Arts for the yarn crawl, Roving Indiana, which starts next week. We need to drive to Mass Ave Knit Shop and pick up our skeins of it so that we can start dropping it in the mail to you guys if anybody does want to order it. That is up available for pre-order on our website, and we will probably go and get that tonight, so that if anybody orders it and wants it, it will work. But this is just a single skein of sock yarn. It's a very standard, like, merino. I think it's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It's just a real standard sock yarn, fingering weight, 400 and something, 430 yards maybe. But I had a fair amount of it left over, which is unusual for me. If you are if you're a longtime follower or have done several of my patterns, you may well notice that I tend to like go real close to the end of the ball of yarn. I don't like having partial balls left over personally, so I tend to make a thing that uses all the yarn to the end. But I know for people following the pattern, that can be very frustrating if you accidentally knit too far and don't have enough yarn left to finish your project. So I actually left a fair amount of yarn still on here. So if you know you like really, really long scarves, you could actually keep going. But I almost just dropped that ball of yarn into my bucket of water for blocking. And I always forget when I'm writing patterns, I always forget to write down what size needle I used. So for posterity's sake, these are US size 5s, and I'm leaving them stuck in the ball of yarn that I made it with so that I can write them down on the pattern as I'm writing the pattern before I forget. And so it's a decently long scarf. And it should get longer as I block it a little bit. It should get wider and longer both. But without further ado, I'm going to actually show you how I block things. I brought scissors. So the first thing that I wanted to point out when I block is I do not weave my ends in before I block my piece. If you, like me, leave your ends really long, you can cut them to like just the 6 inches of length on there. But I would not weave them in because the whole point, especially with this, I know it's going to change quite a bit with blocking. And so if I've woven the ends in, those ends are not knitted, so they're not going to be stretchy like knit fabric would be. You don't want to weave them in and then block it and have your piece stretch and change size and shape. You want to block it first and then weave the ends in later. So I just leave my ends hanging out there. And this is, normally I would do this in the sink, but our bathroom is really not live video worthy. So this is just like hot water, kind of as hot as it comes out of the tap in your house. And you are just going to fill up a bucket or just fill up your sink, a pot, a pan, anything that you got. And I just drop the piece into it. I like to smush it just a little bit. Sometimes they'll almost like float on the top and not go all the way in. But you do want that to be fully submerged. And I'm just going to let that sit for a couple of minutes while I keep chatting. Ooh, I wanted to show off, since this is my show, I'm going to run it how I want to. I wanted to show off my most recent piece that I finished. It's a weaving piece. So while I'm letting that sit and rest in there, I'll show you my woven project. Ooh, it looks really pretty with the light shining through it too. This has been on my loom, which is right there. This has been on my loom for a very long time. And I just stopped where it was done to this point. It was like an inch short of this, of finished. And one of my warp threads broke and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to deal with fixing it. I didn't have any more of that warp. So the warp is the string that goes the long way. And I'm notorious for I just make it as long as I feel like making it. I don't measure or like think about what I'm going to use it for. I just make warp. But the warp was a thread or a yarn rather, it's a viscose, yarn that's got a little bit of texture to it and a little bit of color variation. So it goes from like purples and pinks and blues and greens. It's a really, really pretty one. But it was one skein that my mom had gotten for me absolutely ages ago, years and years and years. And it was one of those that she got me that she secretly wanted me to make her something out of it. And it wasn't so much of a secret because she said it. But there were tons of yardage in this thing. And if I'm honest, I didn't love knitting with the texture. I started to make a little piece with it and I didn't super, super enjoy the knitting with that textured yarn. And so I decided to just warp forever and use every single inch of the yarn to do that. Well, then one of my warp threads broke, and there's actually still warp on my loom, but it's not tons. There's maybe a foot or two, and this is plenty long enough. What do I think I'm going to do with this, or she's going to do with this? So it's just, I think, going to be a really big scarf that she can wrap up in. I need to trim the other fringe to the same length as this one. This was the end that was connected to the loom, to the warp thread that broke, so I had to cut it to the shortness of that broken thread. But yeah, it'd been sitting on my loom doing nothing for like a year. And I wove this much more and then took it off, and that was it. It was finished. I do that a lot. I get real close to done. But the weft, the part that goes side to side, back and forth that you're working with, is just a solid black. It's a cotton silk half and half blend, and it was one where I got a bag of like 10 balls of it on a clearance rack someplace for like $10 for the whole bag. So I still have some left of that, but that yarn feels really nice. So this should be a really, really lovely feeling scarf. My mom is not such a huge wool or like animal fiber person. So the viscose cotton and silk will work really nicely for her. So I just need to trim the fringe even and wash it, and then it should be good to go. So I need to finish that for her because she is spending a lot of time right now sitting in the car outside of the cancer center while my father gets chemo. She's not allowed to go inside because of COVID. And she can't go and like sit in a coffee shop because of COVID. So something really nice and warm and lovely to wrap up in while she sits in the car for 6 hours a week is going to be a nice thing for her, I think. So now my scarf has been sitting in the water for plenty long enough. You want to let it sit long enough that it truly gets saturated all the way down into the fibers of the yarn. So if you drop it in and just let it sit for like a minute, it's probably not saturated all the way to the center of the fiber. But 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're fine. It doesn't have to sit for an hour. If you're like me and you do occasionally forget, and it does sit like overnight, that's fine. As long as it hasn't started molding, it hasn't soaked too long. It's not going to hurt it to be in the water longer. And it's not going to hurt to pull it out after 10 minutes. So anywhere between 10 minutes and 24 hours, you should be fine. You're just going to pick it up and wring it out. Anytime you're dealing with wet animal fiber, you do want to be aware that it is definitely the most fragile that it could possibly be when it's wet. And the warmer the water is and the wetter the fabric is, the more delicate it is. So if you're using really hot water, it's going to sort of stretch and manipulate more. Also potentially more likely to felt. Sock yarn is not really in danger of felting. Sock yarn just has a lot of character. So this is sock yarn. Sock yarn just has a lot of characteristics that make it not real likely to felt. It's normally sock yarn's got a lot of twist in it, and this definitely did. And the more twist, the less likely it's going to felt. Sock yarn's also got the superwash wool and the nylon, which make it not very likely to felt either. So I'm not worried about accidentally felting this piece, but if you're doing a different yarn or a different project, you might worry about that a little bit more. But just do be aware if it's wet, especially if it's warm and wet and really wet, like dripping wet, to just, if you're super aggressive and like Incredible Hulk it, you could theoretically like pull it apart a little bit. And with the drop stitches, so those drop stitches in there, that long strand of just yarn that isn't knitted or crocheted or anything, those are going to have a little bit more fragility as well. So now I neglected to think about the fact that you guys would probably be able to see the bottom half of me. So I put on a regular shirt, but I'm still wearing my pajama pants, which you can probably see now that I think about how I'm doing this video. Probably gonna move your camera just a little bit. Let's see if I can prop it onto something. I want you to be able to see as I block. So here we go. It's nice that I cleaned my craft room, so now I'm not embarrassed that you guys can see parts of my craft room like I normally would be. So when you're blocking, I didn't get my blocking pins out, although you certainly can. And these are foam blocking mats. I do like foam blocking mats, but they are not required. So if you need to block something, don't think, oh, I don't have the mats and I don't have the pins, so I can't do it. You could do this on a towel if you didn't have the foam blocking mats. And if I'm being honest, these are actually my children's toys. The foam blocking mats. I snuck upstairs to get them while they were having their resting time because I knew that I wanted them for this video. But when you're blocking, what you want to think to yourself first, anytime you're blocking a project, is what am I trying to achieve? So you can do different things with blocking. You can very aggressively change the size and shape of things. It's kind of what I'm going to be doing with this. This is going to be making it a lot wider. It's a lot wider and it's going to be quite a bit longer. I should have measured it before I blocked it. But I didn't, so we'll just have to estimate. And so you can pretty aggressively change the size and shape. And I think you can see if I pull it wide, I can basically make it touch the edges of the blocking mats. These blocking mats are 12 inches. They are a 12-inch square both directions. So I can pull it so wide to almost make the widest part hit 12 inches. Maybe not quite all the way, but at least 8 inches wide there. Or I can pull them so that it's super narrow and like 4 inches. but very, very long. So you can pretty aggressively sort of change the size and shape of something that way, if you want to, or you can just block something to kind of make not really change the size and shape at all, just make the stitches lay nicer. And part of that is going to have to do with the fiber that you're using. So some people will say like, oh, I made it out of cotton. No, I made it out of an acrylic, or a synthetic fiber. So there's no point in blocking it because it's not really going to change. It's not true. It may not change size and shape real dramatically, but it will make all of your stitches just lay nicer and just look more even as you go with that. So part of how much you can change the size and shape of something with blocking is going to be dependent on what the fiber content is. So animal fibers are going to block, they're going to change the most with blocking, then the plant fibers, and then the synthetics. So in kind of that order, the most animal fibers, the least synthetics, but they'll all change a little bit. The other thing that's going to affect how much you can change something with blocking is the actual fabric that you've created. So generally, something that's more loosey-goosey and open is going to change more with blocking. Something that's really tight and dense is going to change less with blocking. So this is done, one, on a fairly large needle. I used a size 5 for a sock yarn, which would normally recommend, I mean, if you were doing socks, you might use a 0. If you were doing gloves, you might use a 3. So 5s are looser, a looser gauge, and the drop stitches are going to add a lot of that sort of open texture. So the animal fiber means it's going to change a lot with blocking, and the openness of the fabric means it's going to change a lot with blocking. Also, knitting tends to change more with blocking than crochet, again, because it just has a little bit more openness to it. Crocheting tends to be a little bit denser. And so when I am blocking it, I want to sort of hit a happy medium between, I don't want it real long and narrow, and I don't want it really, really wide and short. So I'm just kind of pulling this and eyeballing it so that I like the way it looks. I want this to have a little bit of that look of ruffling. So I did garter stitch sections between each section of drop stitch. So I definitely want to pull it so that the drop stitch sections pull out a little bit wider than the garter stitch sections, so that I kind of have that ruffled effect. And I'm just going to kind of tug on there. If I wanted to, I could put pins, and I could be a little bit more precise. Could kind of lay a ruler or a measuring tape so that I was getting them the same amount pulled wide every time. But one, I don't have that handy, and 2, precision is not really my style so much. This is why I work in fiber arts and not in woodworking. But I'm kind of just pulling it until I like the way it looks. And it's not like once you've blocked it and it's dried, it's not like it becomes cast in metal or something. It's going to still have a lot of play to it. So it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect with this blocking. So I'm going to stand up and scooch over here. And you will probably, well, you won't know this because of the way that this is set up, but I only have 4 of these tiles. I'm blocking on my little like window bench in my craft room, and it's only about 4 feet long. And I only have 4 of these tiles that I managed to sneak away from my children. So I can't block the full length of this scarf, but that's okay. When you get to the end, I'm trying to move this so that you guys can see the end. When you get to the end, so right here is the end of my like space that I have, I'm just going to fold it back on top of itself and come on back the other way. So 2 layers is obviously going to take a little bit longer to dry than just 1 layer would, but it's not going to take so long that it causes a problem or anything like that. So the other nice thing about, so this section is 2 layers on top of each other. I just flipped it over when I got back here, and that works just fine. The nice thing about these squares being 12-inch, like all 12 inches, is that I then know exactly how long my scarf is. So it's 4 feet, and then it comes back and it's a full 5th foot, and then it comes right to the middle. So it's 5.5 feet long. And so at this point, I know that if I would want it to be longer than that, I could just block it a little bit longer. So I could just pull it down this way, and I could probably pretty easily get this blocked to 6 feet if I wanted to, just by pulling it a little bit longer. So I do prefer my scarves a little bit longer, and so I am just going to pull and tug until I get this to the 6 foot mark. So now it's 6 feet. And so that made it a tiny bit narrower, but not a lot. It's still a good, 1, 2, 3, it's still a good probably 5 inches across, 5 or 6 inches across and 6 feet long. So I'm really happy with that, how that scarf worked out. I love how the yarn looked. I just loved the color of that. I'll put you down. I'm too old to crawl around on the floor, but I do it a lot. So I just love the way that that color came out from the yarn from Leading Man Fiber Arts. And again, that yarn is available from our website for pre-order. And we will have that yarn in our hot little hands to start mailing out either tonight or tomorrow. I've been dreading really getting out and driving on the roads because of all the snow and stuff, but it's not really that bad. So we'll probably get out tonight if they're open. But I hope that that was reasonably entertaining for a Nomad chat, and that you guys found it a little bit interesting. So we have been busy at work with a bunch of new things. We're hoping to have quite a few new things ready for Roving Indiana next week. We've got, I don't know if you saw our Facebook post from this morning. We are doing, Dave has wanted to do some hand-dyed fiber for a long time, and he finally just ordered it, and it arrived, and then he said, oh, I'm going to do fiber. So we have, I think, 200 braids, something like that, of 4-ounce skeins, and he and I, just before I sat down to do this video, worked out what our first 8 colorways are going to be for those. So I took a picture of our planning session, where we basically just pick out colors and make swatches with just markers, and talk about sort of the theme or the feel that we want to have with it. I probably should have recorded that one of these days. So I'll be sharing kind of the pictures of our planning, and then as stuff starts to come out of the dye pot with that, I'll probably, on one of our other chats, I'll probably be sitting and spinning one of the new fiber braids, or maybe felting with one, because I like doing both of those things. They're both good to do with fiber. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody, and keep an eye out before Roving Indiana starts. This pattern from me will be released. This was kind of the last step, was to get it blocked. When it's dry, I'll get some good pictures taken. The pattern's already written. The videos for how to do all the steps are already created. We just need to do some editing, make it pretty, and get everything uploaded and launched. And it will be available for purchase on Ravelry. And it'll work with 1 skein of any sock yarn you got. So enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time.